3 words from a 9-year-old girl changed Family Feud history forever. But it wasn't what she said that broke Steve Harvey. It was how she said it, when she said it, and why she had been keeping it secret for so long. The moment those words left her lips, Steve stopped mid-sentence, dropped his cards, and did something that broke every game show rule in the book. The entire studio fell silent. Cameras kept rolling, but this was no longer television. This was humanity at its most raw. Let me take you back to what happened before those 3 words shattered everyone in that studio. It was a Tuesday afternoon at the Family Feud studios in Atlanta. Steve Harvey was hosting his regular taping, his energy infectious as always, working the crowd with his signature blend of humor and warmth. The Martinez family from Phoenix was facing off against the Thompson family from Memphis. The atmosphere was exactly what you'd expect: competitive, fun, and filled with laughter. 9-year-old Lily Martinez stood at the end of her family's podium, barely tall enough to reach the buzzer. She was the youngest contestant that day, brought by her teenage sister Sophia, who was old enough to compete. Lily wore a bright yellow dress with white flowers that her grandmother had picked out specially for the show. And despite her small stature, there was something remarkably poised about her presence, something old in her eyes. Steve had noticed Lily immediately during the family introductions. There was something about quiet kids that always drew his attention. Maybe it reminded him of his own childhood, growing up shy and observant. Or maybe it was the way they watched everything with those wide, knowing eyes that seemed to hold secrets too big for their small frames. "And who do we have here?" Steve had asked during introductions, kneeling down to Lily's level as he always did with younger contestants. "I'm Lily," she had replied softly, her voice barely audible over the studio audience's enthusiastic applause. "Lily! And how old are you, sweetheart?" 9 years old. 9! And what do you want to be when you grow up?" Lily had paused then, looking directly into Steve's eyes with an intensity that caught him off guard. "I want to help sick kids," she said simply. The audience had let out a collective "awe," and Steve had smiled that warm smile that had endeared him to millions. But something in Lily's tone, something in the way she said "sick kids" instead of "kids" or "people," made him look at her just a moment longer than usual before moving on to the next family member. The game progressed normally for the first 2 rounds. The Martinez family had taken an early lead with some solid answers, and Steve was in his element, working the crowd, making jokes, creating those moments of connection that made Family Feud more than just a game show. But during the 3rd round, everything changed. The question was innocent enough. Name something you might do to cheer up someone who's sad. Sophia, Lily's sister, had just given the #1 answer: give them a hug. The family was celebrating their chance to play for the points, jumping and high-fiving, the studio audience clapping along. Steve stopped mid-joke. The entire studio froze. It wasn't because of anything that had been said. It was because of what Steve saw when he looked over at Lily. While her family was celebrating around her, Lily had tears streaming down her face. Not the happy tears of excitement you might expect from a 9-year-old on national television. These were different. These were the tears of someone carrying something too heavy for their small shoulders. Steve's comedian instincts kicked in first. He walked over to the family podium with that easy smile, ready to comfort what he assumed was just a case of overwhelming emotions. "Hey there, Lily. You okay, sweetheart? This is pretty exciting, huh?" But when Lily looked up at him, Steve saw something in her eyes that stopped him cold. It was pain. Deep, adult pain that no 9-year-old should ever have to carry. "Steve," Lily whispered, her voice so quiet that the microphones barely picked it up. "Can I tell you something?" The studio audience was still buzzing with energy from the previous answer, unaware of the intimate moment unfolding on stage. Steve glanced at the producers in the booth, then back at Lily. Every instinct told him to keep the show moving, to handle this during the commercial break, to maintain the energy and pace that made good television. Instead, he made a choice that would define not just that episode, but his entire legacy as a host. Steve Harvey dropped his cards right there on the studio floor. "Stop the music," he called out to the production booth, his voice carrying across the studio with an authority that silenced everyone immediately. "Stop everything." The theme music cut out. The audience fell silent. Even the camera operators seemed to sense that something unprecedented was happening. Steve walked over to Lily and, without hesitation, lifted her gently from her position at the podium and set her down in the middle of the stage. He knelt down in front of her, his full attention focused on this 9-year-old girl who clearly had something important to say. Behind the scenes, Steve made a decision that defied every producer's expectation. "Lily," he said softly, his voice now stripped of all performance, all entertainment value. This was just Steve Harvey, the man, talking to a child who needed to be heard. What do you want to tell me? The studio was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning humming. 200 audience members held their breath. The Thompson family, their competitors, watched with growing concern and curiosity. Even the producers in the booth had stopped barking directions into their headsets. Lily wiped her eyes with the back of her small hand and looked up at Steve. When she spoke, her voice was clear and strong in a way that surprised everyone who heard it. "I'm dying, Steve." 3 words. 3 simple words that hit the studio like a physical force. The audience gasped audibly. Several people in the front row brought their hands to their mouths. Steve Harvey, the man who had built a career on quick wit and perfect timing, was completely speechless. Lily continued, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. "I have leukemia. The doctor said I probably won't see my 10th birthday. My family doesn't know I know, but I heard them talking to the doctors when they thought I was sleeping." The silence in the studio was deafening. Steve Harvey, who had hosted thousands of hours of television, who had faced every possible situation a game show could throw at him, found himself in completely uncharted territory. But what happened next is why Steve Harvey isn't just a game show host. He's a human being who understands that some moments transcend television. Subscribe and leave a comment because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Steve reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his pocket square, a simple piece of white silk that he always kept perfectly folded. Without saying a word, he gently wiped the tears from Lily's face. "Lily," he said, his own voice now thick with emotion. "How long have you been keeping this secret?" "Since we got picked for the show," she whispered. "I didn't want to ruin it for my family. This was supposed to be fun for them. My sister Sophia has been taking care of me so much, and my mom and dad, they're always so worried. I just wanted them to have one day where they could be happy." The camera operators continued filming, but by now everyone in the studio understood that they were witnessing something far more important than a game show. This was a 9-year-old girl facing the unthinkable, who had spent weeks carrying the secret just to protect her family's moment of joy. Steve Harvey stood up slowly, walked to the Thompson family podium, and spoke directly to them. "I need to ask you folks something, and I need you to be honest with me. Would you mind if we stop this game right here? This little girl needs something more important than points on a board." The Thompson family patriarch, a man in his 60s who had driven 12 hours from Memphis to be there, didn't hesitate for even a second. "Steve, you do whatever that little girl needs. But this is the moment no one in the studio, and no one watching at home, ever saw coming." Steve Harvey walked back to Lily and did something that no game show host in television history had ever done. He took off his suit jacket, the same navy blue jacket he wore for every taping, the one that had become part of his television persona, and he wrapped it around Lily's small shoulders. "Lily," he said, his voice now clearly audible throughout the silent studio, "I want you to keep this, and I want you to know something. You are not dying, sweetheart. You are living. You are living more in these 9 years than most people live in 90. Do you know how I know that?" Lily shook her head, now completely wrapped in Steve's oversized jacket, looking even smaller but somehow stronger. "Because someone who thinks about protecting her family's happiness when she's scared, someone who keeps a secret like that just so her sister can have fun, that's not someone who's dying. That's someone who understands what love really means." The studio audience was openly crying now. But Steve wasn't finished. He turned to address the entire studio, his voice strong and clear. "You know what we're going to do? We're going to restart this game. But this time, both families are going to play together for Lily. Every point anybody scores, every dollar we win, it's all going to help Lily fight this thing. Because that's what family does." The Thompson family immediately left their podium and walked across the stage to join the Martinez family. The Thompsons' teenage son took Lily's hand. The grandmother from Memphis knelt down and hugged Lily like she was her own granddaughter. What happened next was pure magic. Both families played together, calling out answers, celebrating every point as one unified team. Steve abandoned the traditional rules entirely. He made up new questions on the spot, questions designed to make Lily laugh. When she giggled at his silly faces, the entire studio erupted in applause. By the end of that impossible episode, Lily had answered 3 questions herself. Her answers weren't on the board. They were better than the board. When Steve asked, "Name something that makes you brave," Lily had answered, "Telling the truth." When he asked, "Name something that never runs out," she had said, "Love." But the moment that defined everything came at the very end. Steve knelt down next to Lily one more time and whispered something in her ear that the microphones didn't pick up. Whatever he said made Lily smile. Not the polite smile of a sick child, but the radiant, genuine smile of a 9-year-old girl who had just been reminded that she was exactly where she belonged. Later, the producers would reveal that Steve had given Lily his personal phone number and told her she could call him anytime, day or night, whenever she felt scared or sad, or just wanted to talk to someone who understood what it meant to be brave. The episode aired 3 months later and became the highest-rated Family Feud episode in the show's history. But more importantly, it raised over $2 million for children's cancer research. Lily Martinez fought her leukemia for 2 more years. She underwent experimental treatments that were partially funded by the donations that poured in after her episode aired. She celebrated her 10th birthday, then her 11th, then her 12th. On her 12th birthday, she got a special delivery. It was a new suit jacket from Steve Harvey, perfectly tailored to fit her 12-year-old frame. The note inside read, "From one brave person to another, keep fighting, keep loving, keep living, Uncle Steve." Today, Lily is 15 years old and cancer-free. She still has Steve's original jacket, now framed in her bedroom. And every year on the anniversary of that episode, Steve Harvey receives the same text message. "Still living, still loving. Thank you for reminding me what brave looks like." The lesson that 9-year-old Lily taught a television studio, a game show host, and millions of viewers is simple but profound. Sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is tell your truth. Even when, especially when, that truth is hard to say and harder to hear. Steve Harvey learned something that day that changed how he approaches every show, every contestant, every moment he spends in front of those cameras. He learned that sometimes the game isn't the point. Sometimes a 9-year-old girl in a yellow dress and an oversized suit jacket can teach you that the most important victories happen when you stop playing by the rules and start playing by the heart. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. The suit jacket that Steve gave Lily that day has become something of a legend in the Family Feud community. Staff members who were there that day still talk about it. New employees are told Lily's story as part of their orientation, not as entertainment, but as a reminder of what the show can be at its very best. Steve Harvey has said in interviews that Lily's episode changed him as a host and as a person. "I realized that day that my job isn't to run a game show," he said. "My job is to create moments where people can be their best selves." Lily showed me what that looks like. The producers kept every second of that episode's raw footage. It has never been released in its entirety, but those who have seen it describe it as one of the most powerful pieces of television ever recorded. Not because of any technical brilliance or entertainment value, but because it captured something that is increasingly rare in our world. A moment of absolute, unguarded human connection. Lily's family still watches Family Feud together every night. It's their tradition, their way of remembering not just their moment on television, but their reminder that love, real love, shows up in the most unexpected ways. Sometimes wrapped in a game show host jacket, sometimes spoken in the brave words of a 9-year-old girl who refused to let fear silence her truth. And Steve Harvey? He still keeps a spare pocket square in his jacket just in case someone needs their tears wiped away. Just in case another Lily walks onto his stage, carrying a secret too big for small shoulders, needing nothing more than someone to listen, someone to care, someone to remind them that they are not alone. Because that's what love looks like. That's what courage sounds like. And that's what happens when a 9-year-old girl teaches a television studio full of adults what it really means to be alive.